All right, let's then proceed to item 46, and this is a presentation by the California Coastal Commission on its draft public guiding principles and action plan. We have Aubrey Yost with the Coastal Commission who's joining us virtually for the presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Aubrey Yost. Oh, excuse me.
Good afternoon.
I have a presentation and I'm going to share my screen to, let's see. Oh, there it is. Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Aubrey Yost and I'm in the statewide planning unit at the California Coastal Commission. This item is an informational briefing to introduce the California Coastal Commission's new draft guidance document, the Draft Public Trust Guiding Principles and Action Plan, which was presented to the Coastal Commission and released for public comment on June 9th. This document is the product of a 5-year NOAA Federal 309 grant strategy intended to develop management options to protect public trust lands and resources in the face of sea level rise, in coordination with staff from the State Lands Commission. In 2019, the State Lands Commission's executive officer and the Coastal Commission's executive director signed a joint memorandum of understanding on behalf of their agencies, recognizing the need for coordination on a variety of issues, including on understanding the expected impacts of sea level rise upon public trust resources and to ensure protection and restoration of and mitigation for impacts on those resources. This interagency coordination on public trust issues and on the draft public trust guiding principles and action plan in particular has been very positive and productive. Coastal Commission staff have look forward to continuing to coordinate on these issues in the future. The Coastal Commission's draft public trust guiding principles and action plan is available on the public trust page of the Coastal Commission's website and describes how the public trust doctrine relates to the Coastal Commission's work on sea level rise planning. The guiding principles in this draft document provide a set of principles to guide the Coastal Commission in its sea level rise planning work, and the action plan sets forth a suite of potential next steps and research priorities for the Coastal Commission for its work at the interface of the public trust doctrine and sea level rise planning. After the public comment period closes, the public trust guiding principles and action plan will be revised to address comments and then will be brought back to the Coastal Commission for review and adoption. Next slide, please. Under the public trust doctrine, the state's tidelands, submerged lands, and navigable lakes, rivers, and streams are held in trust by the state for the benefit of the public. On the coast, the public trust is generally located on current tidelands, lands covered and uncovered by the ebb and flow of the tides. It also generally includes submerged lands and lands that were historically tidelands at the time California became a state in 1850, but have since been artificially drained or filled. Coastal public trust lands support a variety of ecological, recreational, socioeconomic, and cultural values. Public trust beaches and wetlands provide public access and allow for coastal recreational activities like surfing, sunbathing, bird watching, and fishing. Coastal wetlands support biodiversity, perform a variety of important ecosystem services, and support commercial and recreational fisheries offshore. Unlike much upland coastal property, tidelands are often open to all visitors at no or low cost and are thus a critical resource to provide equitable coastal access. Public trust tidelands are also significant areas for coastal affiliated tribes and tribal resources and practices. Next slide, please. In the past century, the average global temperature has increased by about 0.8 degrees Celsius, and global sea levels have increased by 7 to 8 inches. In addition, sea level rise has been accelerating in recent decades, with the rate tripling since 1971. Sea level rise is presenting unprecedented challenges for the California coast, which will only increase as sea level rise accelerates in the future. Sea level rise will cause new areas of the shoreline to be regularly inundated by tides, increased erosion of the shoreline, increased storm flooding, rising groundwater tables, and saltwater intrusion into coastal aquifers. These hazards will place both coastal development and coastal resources, including public trust resources, at risk. Without careful planning and adaptation, public trust uses, such as coastal access, are likely to be negatively impacted by inundation and other coastal hazards up and down the coast, and may ultimately be entirely lost in some areas. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the Coastal Commission draft Public Trust Guiding Principles and Action Plan was developed in coordination with staff from the California State Lands Commission as part of a joint federally funded long-term public trust and sea level rise coordination project. As you know, the State Lands Commission has exclusive jurisdiction to lease and manage most public trust lands, and it must ensure that any such leases are consistent with, or at least do not significantly impair, public trust resources, uses, and needs. The State Lands Commission staff have expressed support for the draft guiding principles and action steps and recognize the ongoing role of the State Lands Commission that the State Lands Commission will have in implementing several steps as part of ongoing coordination, subject to funding and staff resources. Next slide. This project follows presentation of the Protecting Public Trust Shoreline Resources in the Face of Sea Level Rise report to the Coastal Commission in November 2021 by Dr. Charles Lester, Director of the Ocean and Coastal Policy Center at the Marine Science Institute of University of California, Santa Barbara. That report discusses public trust issues relating to Coastal Commission planning and regulation of development on the immediate shoreline and adjacent uplands. It also includes a variety of legal, policy, management, and technical recommendations to address public trust tidelands and sea level rise based on tideland science and the public trust doctrine. The draft Public Trust Guiding Principles and Action Plan builds on many of these recommendations. Next slide, please. The 10 principles included in the draft Public Trust Guiding Principles are intended to assist the Coastal Commission, local governments, and members of the public in determining how to carry out the Coastal Act and address sea level rise in a manner that is consistent with the public trust doctrine. The Coastal Act itself is an exercise of the legislature's public trust authority and responsibility, and as such, aligns with and implements aspects of the common law public trust doctrine, including through its emphasis on public access, ocean-related recreation, and coastal dependent uses like ports and fishing. The draft principles range from findings related to the impact of sea level rise on the public trust to Coastal Commission commitments to consider public trust resources in decision-making. Some of these draft principles include that the climate crisis and sea level rise are moving the public trust landward. Development decisions and sea level rise will impact public trust lands, uses, and resources. The Coastal Commission will identify anticipated impacts to current and future public tidelands, and that the implementation of the public trust doctrine through Coastal Commission actions can advance environmental justice. Next slide, please. The draft also presents a series of next steps and research and policy questions relating to sea level rise and the public trust that the Coastal Commission would prioritize over the next 5 years as staff resources and funding allow. These action steps build on the recommendations from Dr. Lester's report and our staff's work with State Lands Commission staff over the past several years. The action steps range from interagency and tribal coordination to public outreach, engagement, and public education on the purpose and role of the public trust doctrine and the management of California's lands and natural resources. Other action steps relate to Coastal Commission decisions relevant to the public trust, such as a step to identify development and decisions that result in coastal squeeze, leading to the loss of public trust resources, and an action step to consider updates to Coastal Commission regulations relating to mitigation of the adverse effects of sea level rise on public trust lands. More discussion of each of these guiding principles and next steps is included in the draft document. Next slide. The draft Public Trust Guiding Principles and Action Plan is currently only a draft. Before bringing the final document back to the Coastal Commission for review and adoption, Coastal Commission staff will seek input from coastal affiliated California Native American tribes and state and local government agencies, as well as public comment on the draft. The draft is now available for public comment. A link to the document can be found on the Public Trust section of the Coastal Commission's website. Members of the public, commissioners, and others interested are encouraged to provide comments via email to statewideplanning@coastal.ca.gov by July 24th, 2022. That concludes the presentation for this item. Thank you, commissioners, for your time.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Aubrey, and really appreciate the collaboration and the coordination with between the two commissions. Questions or comments, commissioners?
Well, I actually, first let me thank you, Aubrey, for that really comprehensive presentation. And let me thank the audio guys for fixing whatever that was.
We're not done yet.
It's working, I think, for the moment. But thank you for that presentation. It was really pretty clear. There was one question I had when you talk about the way that the location of public trust lands could be impacted by where the tidelands are. So
I can imagine that if there were an area where part of the ocean receded, which I think is obviously less likely, that there could be more lands, or they would move seaward. But the main thing I think you were talking about is if the ocean is moving landward. So what can we anticipate relative to lands that are currently under the jurisdiction of others, whether it's a private entity or a tribe or a city or a county? Are we defining public trust lands as land that is submerged or not submerged based on the tides? And so if the location of the tides changes, then that automatically gives jurisdiction to this body or the Coastal Commission. I'm just really kind of interested in exactly what that is likely to mean to decision makers in the future.
Yes, that is a really excellent question. So as we all are usually familiar with property boundaries, like owning our home or a piece of property, it's usually bound four corners, right? And the meets and bounds descriptions, the legal descriptions of that property are very clear, and you can go out and survey it and you know exactly where the land that you own is located. Land or property boundaries along the coast aren't fixed. And that's pursuant to a statutory law and then case law that's been interpreted over time by the California court system all the way up to the California Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court. So along the best way to describe this is on a sandy beach that has been unaltered by human activity. And if we're thinking about, let's say, Malibu, with homes that are right on the beach, they'll have their property description will likely call to the mean high tide line. That's their seaward boundary line of their property description. The California law has stated that the boundary of public trust tidelands, the tidelands that the state owns, and then private uplands is the ordinary high water mark. The California Supreme Court has interpreted that to mean the mean high tide line. And so that's how we measure what that boundary is. And what that means practically is that that boundary is constantly moving. It is not fixed. And so as sea level rises, then the boundary of the state's tidelands ownership interest moves landward. But similarly, if there's accretion, natural accretion, the boundary of the upland property owner moves with that accretion. And this has been well established in case law through various different court decisions. So when we're talking about sea level rise and jurisdictions of various agencies, under the public trust, under state law, the State Lands Commission is the land steward or the land management agency. That's why we issue leases for the occupation of state property. The Coastal Commission's jurisdiction is regulatory and is much more geographically broad, and it's dictated under statute about what the coastal zone is. So the Coastal Commission will have regulatory jurisdiction over development activities, even on private lands. The boundary between public tidelands and private uplands, in a lot of different circumstances, there are exceptions, like where there's urban waterfronts and bays like San Francisco and San Diego, where the boundary isn't moving because it's been fixed for various reasons. But we do expect on the open coast that this boundary is going to move, and with projections of sea level rise, that mean high tide line will move landward.
So in that case law, if I could just, Madam Chair, one more follow-up question. In that case law, are there cases then that improved property currently belonging to someone that where they either put a porch or, where water might even, at a high or median high tide could come up to their, splash against their window? Are we talking about people's living rooms being suddenly declared the jurisdiction of the public trust?
Not their physical houses, but the land underlying them. That's a real possibility.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kanellakis. Now, I appreciate the report, and I think your questions, Commissioner Kanellakis, really speak to kind of the, I think just the urgency, but really appreciate the proactiveness of the two commissions putting these principles and action plans together, and the outreach that will be attendant to it, and the public comment we received back, I think is all part of the public awareness campaign around what could happen under these circumstances. And it's oftentimes, it's not real or known until it actually happens. And I hope that this way of being proactive and really understanding our respective jurisdictions and responsibilities, as we've done when we've worked in coordination and collaboration with the Coastal Commission, can really just broaden the public awareness about this. It's very real. It's a very real risk that is likely going to accelerate in the next period of time. I mean, all the scientific reports just suggest that it's it's on its way. So I think with that, Katie, let me see if there are any members of the public who wish to address the commission on this issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our first public commenter is David Yao.
Good afternoon, Mr. Yao.
Thank you, Chair Yee and Commissioners. My name is David Yao, and I'm with the Port of San Diego, here to provide the perspective of a state lands trustee on the draft public trust guiding principles and action plan before you today. The Port of San Diego is a partner in protecting California's state tidelands and submerged lands. So when you consider the great variety of coastal dependent uses along our waterfront, that's a dynamic responsibility. As described in our AB 691 Sea Level Rise Vulnerability Assessment and Coastal Resiliency Report, one-size-fits-all approaches don't work. In a bay or harbor environment, multiple strategies are needed. Recently, State Lands and Coastal Commission worked together with other state agencies to adopt 7 sea level rise principles. Now, Principle 6 is especially interesting to us. It called out ports and harbor districts for their, and I quote, unique characteristics, significance, constraints, and values of these public trust uses, end quote. Well, that statement's still true. And the unique characteristics and complexity of port operations call for a balanced approach, from nature-based to structural and policy approaches that fit the need. So for the sake of consistency, we'll support recognizing that managing and protecting coastal dependent critical infrastructure is different for ports. So adding that clarity to guiding principle number 8, I think it is, in the plan that we're looking at today, it's going to help fulfill our mission of protecting and promoting diverse public trust uses. The other thing I'll add is your detailed strategic plan provides a path forward for collaborative leadership on that issue. And this is wonderful, particularly when it comes to the public trust. So in any principles the commission might consider, we'll urge a flexible and adaptive approach that considers the unique characteristics of ports and harbors and public trust needs as we continue to address coastal resiliency through port tidelands. Thanks again from San Diego.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, very much for your comments, and very much appreciate the relationship we have with our ports, and definitely understand your comments with respect to the flexibility that you are seeking, and that has been recognized in some of our other principles. Katie, our next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next speaker is Laura Lane.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lane.
Can you hear me, commissioners?
We can hear you. Thank you, Laura.
Excellent. I'm sorry, I was having a little bit of technical difficulties. On behalf of the California Association of Port Authorities, which represents California's 11 public ports, I'd like to express CAPA's appreciation for the State Lands Commission's longstanding partnership in working with our ports on maintaining and growing California's maritime industry. With respect to the development of the Coastal Commission's draft public trust guiding principles and action plan, we want to stress the importance of developing this action plan in partnership with the State Lands and the Coastal Commission in order to develop a plan that takes into consideration the investments in California's ports and the need to protect the state's maritime industry. California's coast and tidelands are a national treasure that involve protecting natural resources, recreational opportunities, as well as its unique industry. Ports provide critical coastal infrastructure that bolster our local economies and are critical to the supply chain. CAPA looks forward to working with you on the development of this action plan to ensure it provides this flexibility needed to address the impacts of sea level rise on all of California's diverse coastal resources. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Laura. Katie, our next speaker, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, we have no other hands raised to provide public comment on this item.
Very well, thank you very much. And again, thank you, Aubrey, for the presentation, and for the folks who have provided some comments to us today.